So what is StateRAMP modeled after? It's modeled after the FedRAMP process, just like we did with ASRAMP. I'll say we had state procurement officials, cyber professionals, IT professionals, private sector organizations, and national organizations come together and spend more than 1,000 hours during the year of 2020 investing in helping to stand up and create the structure for StateRAMP. So I believe we had a lot of the right thinking and good processes in place. It's based on the NIST 800-53 standard. If you talk to any of your tech people, they'll say, yep, that's the one. There are other standards out there that all map to this. If you've heard of IRS 1075 or MARS-E for Medicare, Medicaid, CGIS for criminal justice information, right? All those things can map into the NIST 800 standards from a control standpoint. The whole value, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, is that a supplier can come in, they can certify once, and then as StateRAMP being a trusted source for states, they can then take that certification to any state, right? So if you're familiar with the FedRAMP process, it's similar for the federal government, but the issue is that suppliers can't elect to put themselves in the FedRAMP process. If they don't have a federal contract, they can't even play. And there's a lot of suppliers that we work with as states that will never do business with the federal government. And so we want to have a mechanism for them to do this. So coming back to why, which is I hope where I started, which is we want to ensure that the data is protected and we're trying to reduce the burden for everyone in the ecosystem. All right, so before I transition to our table, our open discussion questions, whether we do this at table or not, any questions on any content that I covered? Are you still awake? Okay. You have a question back here?
Hi, thank you. This is Gary Renslow, California. Really interesting on the StateRAMP concept, especially since not all vendors can be in FedRAMP. Where are you taking it? So what's next with that?
From a StateRAMP perspective?
Yeah, so are the vendors now posted for what you've already, okay.
So you can go to the StateRAMP website, stateramp.org. You can go out there, there actually is an authorized vendor list. Most of the folks on there that are on that authorized vendor list are already FedRAMP, but they've also signed up for the program. Arizona is in the process. We're going to be the first pilot state to implement this. But I know that a number of states have programs in place that are doing some sort of vetting of suppliers in your procurement process. So what I would suggest is to look at the policies and procedures that you have and see how can StateRAMP, really, I'll say amend and augment that process. For Arizona, my expectation is that I want to see StateRAMP take on the bulk of the burden, right, of this process. And it becomes a virtuous ecosystem from my perspective, because all the vendors that I might deal with at the state level, now all my locals know that they can trust engaging with them, right? And then I can benefit from that too. If they engage with a supplier that goes through that process to meet one of their needs, and I can find them on the list, and now I know I can engage with them and I don't have to do the work again. The other thing with StateRAMP is there's flexibility built into StateRAMP. So for those of you that may be familiar, there is the FedRAMP low, there's FedRAMP medium, there's FedRAMP high. So high is basically like, military secret type stuff. Most of us don't deal in that. Pretty much everything we do in state government is going to fall under that low and medium threshold. And with StateRAMP, we have a low, we'll call it low plus, which is if you have some special requirement above and beyond what would be the low or medium standard, there's a way to deal with that. And so we can just assess the gap if you have that for your state.
One follow-on question. How do you know the vendors are maintaining their compliance?
Part of, and here's the way that we modeled that after FedRAMP is that just like with FedRAMP, there are third-party assessment organizations, or 3PAOs. So this is a third party that actually comes in, assesses all of the controls of the organization, and then they actually engage in that continuous monitoring process I talked about. So they're getting the regular reports, they're getting the readouts, and they're actually validating that the results of those processes and procedures are in place. And that validated information is reported back. Any other questions? All right, well, one more thing I want to do, if you have further questions on state ramp, I'm sorry, was there another question? Are you pointing? No. All right. Here we go.
I was going to let someone else chat, but see, we're having a CIO discussion here. One last thing, telework.
Yes.
That's been problematic. So what kind of efforts has Arizona taken, or do you have any particular policies or controls around using your own devices and storing documents on personal computers?
Yeah, so we actually issued guidance that if somebody wanted to use, I guess the only circumstance under which we allow somebody to use a personal device is if they're connecting to a virtual desktop. So we don't want, basically if we can't control that endpoint, we don't want state data going onto it, right? So if they're state issued devices, that's fine. Because of some of the circumstances early in the pandemic, where I think everyone probably saw the experience, like finding laptops, finding devices, that was tough. And you were like months out from getting them. And so what we did was we stood up virtual desktop environments and then enabled agencies that needed to have access to those. We showed them how to configure them, how to set them up. We had some that we set up for agencies that we manage, and then large organizations could just build on the processes that we established. And that would enable them to create that and then make that available. But the virtual desktop environments, it's a secure encrypted connection between that individual's device and that virtual desktop environment, and no data is actually ever downloaded to the local machine. So then from a state perspective, I'm not concerned about what is the patch level of this person's home computer. If they're still running Windows 95, that's okay. If they're running IE7, that's okay. I'm not worried about that, because there's nothing from that environment that can transition into my virtual desktop, and nothing from my virtual desktop that can go down. Yes?
Of course, thank you for the presentation. I am not the CIO, but we've gotten feedback related to kind of working from home, that hybrid model around the security of people's internet, I guess wireless internet, and printers. And no one has been able to explain it to me in a way that I fully understand.
Okay, all right.
But we are not all of our processes across the state enterprise allow for e-signature.
Okay.
So there are still documents from time to time that have to be printed. And a challenge that I think we will soon run into is, I think all the new laptops that are rolled out don't allow for printing.
Okay.
So if you're working from home, you cannot print from home or at home.
Okay.
I believe if you're in the office, you can print from your device. If you had an older laptop, apparently you're still able to print for the time being. I've never really understood the security issue, but it's been explained to me that there's a security issue separate and apart from using your VPN or your virtual desktop.
Yeah. So
how are y'all thinking about that?
Okay, so I'll try and explain that quickly. Which is, so the issue, I'll say there's two issues, right? Once you physically produce that document at home, now we have a state document or state data that is existing outside a state building, and we want to be careful about that, right? Someone prints personal information, and that's sitting on their desktop at home, and they have friends over, just simple basic stuff. In terms of the printers, right? The issue with printers is that inside every single printer is memory, and that memory is non-volatile memory. In other words, you turn the printer off, you turn it on, that memory is still there, and some quantity of the history of documents that were printed on that printer sit in that memory forever. Or at least, and again, I'll say it's fixed amount of memory, so think about, if you're filling a glass, right, you get to the top, stuff starts to flow out. So it will be some amount of history of the documents printed will be in that printer. So if your house is broken into and that printer is taken, now the state has lost control of that data, because that memory can be read, and can be reproduced. So I'll say that's the detail level of why is it no printing at home, and we've wrestled with the same thing. And so the processes that we've sought to put in place for Arizona are very similar to what you're doing, telling people, nope, you don't print from home. And if you do need to print, putting the right things in place to make printing, I'll say, a bit easier, right? So this can be, you can print from home and you can pick it up at the office. So you can walk up to a printer, take your badge, scan your badge, and whatever you have in the print queue will print for you. Or you can delegate someone to pick up your printed material for you, and they can go and scan their badge and pick up that printed material. So there are solutions out in the market that can do those things and make it a bit easier. But I'll say, controlling that information in this hybrid work environment is still important. And so we can't just kind of gloss over it and say, we even said, well, what if the state buys a printer? It's like, well, I don't want to get in the business of buying a bunch of printers and sending them to all the employees' homes. And then you have all the, the maintenance and the supplies and all that kind of stuff to go along with it. So it's not a matter of state-owned or not state-owned. And maybe there are exceptions where you might choose to do that. But in general, it's just like the laptop, right? We don't have the same controls on printers that we do on laptops. On laptops, I can say, hey, I can encrypt that drive. I can remotely wipe it. I can detect it. If anyone ever turns it on, I can go, oh, I saw it and I've wiped it. I know it's taken care of. I might have lost the asset, but I've protected the data. And with a printer, I can't do that. Does that help?
That's the first time it's ever been explained in a way that is helpful and useful, so yes.
Okay, good. All right, so last thing I want to share before we go to our discussion questions. Leah, would you raise your hand or stand up? So Leah McGrath is the Executive Director for StateRamp. If you want to know any more about StateRamp, she's here the next couple of days, and she'd be happy to talk with you. All right, so here are the discussion questions. Number one, how do you identify critical assets, data, and/or systems within your state, and what strategies have you implemented to protect them? Do you know how this works for your state? Do you know who knows how this works for your state?
Yes.
Okay.
IT department.
Right, but at the end of the day, right, you need to know that's happening. And so, it may not be as important that, hey, I know this tool and it does this thing and it goes and fine. Right, you've got someone that you can go to that says, yes, I know that we have 40,000 endpoints. I know where they are, and I can tell you what their patch level is. Or you might find, you think you have 40, but you actually have 100,000. Right? Don't assume that you just have a corresponding number of laptops or desktops to employees. There are multiple devices. And all those things need to be protected. All right, our next question. So given the recent supply chain attacks, how are you assessing your vendors and their technology suppliers as part of your procurement process? Do all of you know that you have that wrapped into your acquisition process? Okay, the next one's a fun question. Cyber insurance. As premiums continue to increase and incidents being covered decrease, I will tell you in Arizona, we saw I think our premiums doubled and our coverage was cut in half. And that was a pretty generous outcome. I've heard worse things from other states. But how does changes in cyber insurance fit into your risk management strategy?
Self-insured.
Okay, I think a lot of folks are moving towards self-insured, and that can be fine. And/or you're self-insured with some sort of overarching coverage. I think what we found was, I don't know how many millions of dollars we pay before somebody else gets involved. But so here's the question that I'm asking, and I'm talking with our security team about, and I'm talking with my other CIOs about. How confident are you in our ability to recover from a ransomware attack?
Not very.
right? So do you know do you know how your agency or how any entity within your state would fare in the case of a ransomware attack?
So, Jared, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Do you have within your continuity of operations plan in Arizona, do you have a cyber attack coup that you exercised internally, externally, and go from there too? Because I think that's an interesting.
So those are,
part.
yeah, and those are all things I expect. Every state has something like that, but I bet most states haven't gone the step of saying we're actually going to take an environment, lock it up with ransomware, and then see if we can recover. Because in our continuity of operations and disaster recovery plans, all the tabletop exercises are, they might be built around, okay, this external cyber attack, there's a denial of service, what are we gonna do? Oh no, right? And so we figure out, okay, well, we reroute the network and we do these things and we knock it down and we keep going. But if somebody got through the front door and locked up our house, what do we do?
Would you pay the ransom?
No.
Well, that's a different trend now.
So here's the thing is that, that's the position I want to take and I want to be in, is to be so confident that I can say, no, we will not pay the ransom because I know what my ability is to recover, how long it takes me, and at what level I can recover, and have that expectation known and set. And so I would say the challenge I have, for each of you to talk to your IT professional and or cyber professional is to say, can you tell me what our time to recover and my ability to recover? So at what level and how long does it take me to get back in business if we get locked up with ransomware? Because I think if you look at what is driving the premiums today is a lot of people paying out, right? That's why the insurance companies are going, okay, well, it's going to keep costing more, because if all we're going to do is pay money. But the cost of recovery, if you're not prepared, is pretty high. If you look at some of the government organizations that have said, okay, we're not paying, but we weren't ready either. And so what they had to do in terms of cost of time, money, resources, third parties that got involved to go through that recovery process. So that's one that's, it'll be a fun discussion, I'm sure, right? I would say to ask for the next COOP tabletop exercise, right? To say, okay, how do we include ransomware in that discussion as part of the strategy, and so you understand where you're at. Well, I'm trying to start at home and say, okay, within my own Department of Administration, I want to take one of our key applications, put it in a sandbox environment, lock it up, and prove I can recover. Do the processes and procedures I have in place work for this? It does, great. We expand that and we start to grow that out across the agencies. But I want to know. Okay, last one is, with cities and counties becoming increasingly digital and connected, what role, if any, do you see that you as a state government have in ensuring the protections of citizens across those environments? Do you see yourself and the state as part of a broader ecosystem, right? If you have great security stuff going on at the state, but the county or a local municipality gets compromised, it still affects your citizens. That still may take down critical infrastructure. So do you see the connection between what you're doing at the state and the fact that in some cases we as states have more resource available to us to help assist them and help them be better in what they're doing? So be seeing yourself as part of that broader ecosystem, and that we have a responsibility to then help our local government partners be successful. All right. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, JR. Really appreciate your comments.